Hello, this is Jim Mitchell, and we are back with another episode of the Libertarian Uncensored podcast. Um, let's see. First, we have Iowa legislators propose a ban on same-sex marriage from NBCNews.com by your state officer. And I said it's probably just virtue signaling because, Iowa was the fourth state to legalize it back in 2009, yet somehow they'll magically repeal it. As a 26-year-old, same-sex marriage has been legal in Iowa for the majority of my lifetime. It's kind of a bad virtue signal, but the thing is that the government is it will justify whatever bullshit it justifies. I don't like how they think that a bunch of people taking a box next to their name or writing down gives them legitimate authority. I think people need to nullify wherever they view as unjust from the government, whether it be on a national, state, or local scale, as long as they don't violate the NAP. And that nullification should be always as peaceful as possible as long as the NAP is not violated. Then we have Twitter lawyers tell federal judge that nothing in the Twitter files shows they were a tool for government censorship. That's from a tweet from Brad Heath, and Ninja Lover shared that, and I said they were definitely pushed by the government, not necessarily forced. Look at part 6 and 7 of the Twitter files. If for example, the FBI really pushed content to them that they wanted them to censor, and I think that's important to note. And Twitter should probably be using me as their lawyer, I think, because I probably will get that better than what their actual lawyers are doing, I would say, because the FBI clearly pushed Twitter. They had pervasive contact with them. They said links, they implied to censor them, they gave them money, and I think that's important to really note how deeply ingrained the FBI was, and probably still might be in Twitter's culture, and how they can control. The government knows that Twitter is a tool for controlling the narrative, and they want to have a piece of, and I always know that controlling narrative is the most important thing they have, so that's why it's important for the government to get involved. The government views itself as being important, needing to be involved in social media, because it is, the control the narrative, control the people. Like, look at China, as soon as it's going to be up like China, you want people to say anything that questions the government, and people are getting cut off from social creditors, sent to prison, or camps for it. So that's what I think. Then we have good morning from my state's LP single group. Good meme from my state's LP single group, and that was a meme from a guy I found my state's LP single group. It was if a bigot attacks you in your home, it shouldn't matter if your rifle has a 16-inch barrel or a 12-inch one. Support LGBT rights, repeal the National Firearms Act. And that's the thing. It's important to not restrict anyone's use of firearms, because or I say as long as they don't violate the NAP. So if you should be able to own whatever weapons you want as long as you're not hurting other people, because anyone could use those weapons against you. It's important to remember, just because the government says, oh, we'll make all these weapons legal, the military will still have them, and the government still have them. I don't trust the government to use that. The government has justified bombing their own country before. Look at the Moon bombing Philadelphia in 1985. It's the government will bomb you if they feel like it, and they can get away with it scot-free. So that's why you gotta keep all these weapons in case the government comes after you. Something like Ruby Ridge or Waco, or it might happen any day, and that's the scary thought. So that's why you gotta keep these weapons. And if the government tries to take them, say no. And if they try to take them by force, you have every right to resist, I would say. Louisiana, 9 of her states sue U.S. government over steep flood insurance rate increases, from APnews.com. And that is one from Ninja Lover. And I would say I don't really care too much about the flood insurance rate or whatever, but I guess, I think if the states want to sue the government, I'm all for the smaller entities challenging the bigger ones. I'm always supporting the nullification down to the individual level. So, I think if the state doesn't if the court does rule against the state, I think they have every right to nullify the flood insurance rate. So that's my thoughts there. And then we have, after Utah City, Dewey decimates librarians' free speech right, fire threatens lawsuit, from the fire.org by Skill Whisperer. And that is I definitely think that the librarians do have the free speech right, and I do think, the librarians should be able to have whatever books they want. But, so I think this might be school libraries, So, or if it's not school libraries, I think librarians should be able to say whatever books they want, but, Sometimes the government might say otherwise, so that's why I support nullification. Display whatever books you want. And if they fire you for it, they fire for you for it. That's, I think, that's ultimately what might happen, and that's sadly how it is sometimes. Missouri hires an anti-abortion marketing agency by your state officer, and that's from stltoday.com. And yeah, I don't think that you should be hiring all the marketers for your thing, but the thing is that the government's just gonna spend money regardless, and whatever bullshit it wants to spend money on, and there's really nothing you can do about it. Because the government just spend. The Republicans say, "Oh, we're fiscally conservative." That's not true. They like to spend too, as this evidence. So that's why I think you gotta say, um, we can't spend all this money, or we're gonna stand up to you. And I think you gotta stand your ground here and say, "No, this is bullshit." Federal judge rules Tennessee drag restrictions unconstitutional left trial from lawdork.com by your state officer. And I think I would agree with that. The judge was Trump appointed, but I would agree with that. It does kind of go against free expression and was pretty vague. So I think I would agree with that. Utah Governor Cox is on vetoing the trans sports bill. One trans athlete in state from SLTRib.com from your state officer. And I think, it's important. I personally think, the government, I think, the government will justify what justifies. But, if the government does want to work on the individual level like this, I think that's okay too. So, yeah. So, yeah, I personally don't support the trans woman in women's sports, especially after puberty. But if I think they should have the freedom of association to do so if they want to, I would say. And we have podcast Dave Rubin on why libertarians should vote for DeSantis from Reason.com. I personally would disagree with Rubin there. I think DeSantis is kind of an authoritarian, but I don't think that he's as bad as like some media sources make out to be. I personally don't think he's a friend of liberty. I think he wants to enforce and bully his cultural standards onto everyone, just like how a lot of the woke progressives do as well. They want to force and bully all their cultural standards onto everyone. I think that's you got to stand up and say, you can have your cultural standards, but you shouldn't be forcing and bullying your cultural standards onto me. And I think that's important to remember. To always stand up for what you believe in. Ron Paul wishes you a happy Pride. Oh wait, no, he doesn't. From Twitter.com by Ninja Lover, and that is a tweet from Vermin Supreme, and it's a picture of a Ron Paul quote. I miss the closet. Homosexuals need to speak. Not homosexuals not speak of the rest of society. We're far better off when social pressure forced them to hide their activities. They could also not be as promiscuous. It is any coincidence that the AIDS epidemic developed after they came out of the closet and started hyper promiscuous sodomy. I don't believe so, medically or morally. And I think that's a little bit bigoted, but I think Ron Paul's every right to say that. I do think these days, you're definitely more and more forced to see LGBTQ content everywhere these days. So I think that's important to remember. So I do think, he does have a bit of a point in that everyone's trying to shove their agenda down your throat these days, especially on social media, and I think that's really important to remember. So that's my thoughts there. And we have Free Public Transportation by Ruin My Circle Jerk, and that is a YouTube video from Free to Choose Network. And I definitely would agree with the title. It's free tea on public transportation. Because nothing in this life is free. Everything's going to cost some kind of energy or social capital or economic capital. Everything's going to cost something. It's just when you make something free, you just don't make it not the cost of it non-existent, I would say. Even for those who do receive free public transportation, is it really free because you're still using the energy, even if you're not exchanging capital, the energy is still being dealt with, the resources are still being used, and I think that's really important to remember. Next we have Uh, Rising wages don't have a large effect on overall inflation from Ritholtz.com by Patan Chain. I personally would disagree with that, but I guess if you want to believe that, I guess you should be able to. So I personally think that the more we're paying people, the more inflation there is. Because the more the higher you raise the baseline, the more money we're spending, and the more money you're putting out in the economy, and that's going to raise inflation. So I would disagree with this, but I guess think whatever you want. Texas SB 624 would restrict homeowners from installing solar panels from the cooldown.com by Ninja Lover. I personally would disagree with that. I think people should be able to put whatever they want on their own house as long as NAP isn't being violated. And I don't think solar panels are a NAP violation. Maybe some other people might think otherwise, but I think you should be able to put whatever you want in your own house as long as you can do that, and the force to defend whatever. I would say. A great quote from your state officer, and that's an image link to James Baldwin quote. I imagine one of the reasons people cling to their hate so stubbornly is because they sense once hate is gone, they will be forced to deal with pain. That's I think life is inherent. I would agree with that. Life is inherently painful, so people need to find distractions from it. Life is inherently painful. It's inherently suffering, and people want to get some kind of distraction, and so they come up with these narratives to distract them, and that's why we have everything do that is interesting. I would say people need to believe in something. That's why you have I would argue American society is more religious than ever, is because people are really getting into their spirituality. Not just through traditional religion these days, but also through these increasingly the woke progressive religion. I would say that's important to remember as well. The 10 stages of genocide by Motherfucking Inc., and that is stage 1 classification, stage 2 symbolization, stage 3 discrimination, stage 4 discrimination. Everyone always says there's going to be genocide, and I think, I don't know if we'll get that, but, I remember last year was the last year the unvaccinated say we're sharing this to say the 10 stages of genocide. This year it's the LGBTQ people, so, it's everyone thinks they're going to be genocided any second, it seems, but, I don't know if anyone really has the social capital to completely pull off a genocide right now, but we'll see what happens, I guess. Quebec seeks to ban planned obsolescence from CBC. From CBC, and I posted that, and I said, fuck planned obsolescence, but it shouldn't be the government's issue to deal with. You can't expect the government to deal with all the bad things. You can't just have the government solve all your problems. You need to have the free market solve some of your problems on occasion, or other sources maybe, but you just can't rely on government all the time, I would say, and I think that's definitely important to note. China's CBDC is linked to your digital ID. The government control exactly how you spend your money from Tushiko on Twitter, and I posted that. And I said, probably coming to the U.S. soon, sadly. I definitely think the increasing push for a cashless society by saying stuff like cash can spread COVID was the first step. And I agree that cash can be more burdensome, but there is a small price to pay for not going full social credit system, in my opinion. And the thing is, I definitely think we're gonna get the full social credit system. You're gonna say the wrong thing on social media. You're not gonna be able to spend any money. You may as well be in prison. So soon you're not gonna be able to criticize government at all. And I think that's gonna be scary. I think the U.S. is definitely gonna become China in that regard. The Libertarians praising Twitter for trying to stifle what is a woman are progressive subversives who want viewpoints challenging their narrative silenced rather than try to contend with them. That's from Toad on Twitter, and I posted that, and I said, libertarians support free speech even if we might disagree with them being said. That's the thing. Twitter, you shouldn't be forced Twitter to provide what is one of the platform where I said, no one is entitled to a platform. We need to have as many people having free expression as possible. It's how we allow for maximum diversity of thought. Everyone, I think, should be able to express themselves. It's everyone's going to express themselves as long as they say the right. Everyone says, "Oh, we're all for free expression. Just we need strong content moderation." But it's eventually you're just justifying censorship. You need to support free associate, free discussion and free expression. That's what I say here. I don't think you should necessarily force people to do that, force platforms to do that, but I definitely think they should be pressured to, I would say. Trump versus Biden, epic presidential AI rap battle for Midjourney after is next, and yeah, I don't really hear much for that, but that looks some interesting. I would say, yeah, I definitely think Trump versus Biden. I hope we don't get that again, but it looks like we might. I think a good case for why George Washington should set a one-term precedent instead of a two-term one. We have immigration law defies the American Constitution from the Atlantic.com by Room My Circles Work. I agree with that personally more into pro-immigration, but I guess you do have a case for an libertarian case for anti-immigration as well because of the welfare state currently. So I guess that's my thoughts on that. Solar panels and eco disaster waiting to happen from BBC News by Ninja Lover, and I don't think that's probably true, but I guess if people want to think that they solar panels are an ecological disaster, I think they should be able to think so, and I think they should be able to express that opinion. Then we have Trev from 2020 from Anarchy Volt on the Odyssey, and I posted that. That's a documentary I think that was on Netflix, but I posted the Odyssey link because that's what I got from my state signal group that my candidate from governor last year. What's his name? Matt Hackford shared that, and I agree that Marvin Haymeyer did go a little far, but I do think I like how he didn't care for the government zoning bullshit and was willing to stand up for himself. And I think that's why you always need to stand up for yourself, even if it's doing something like completely crazy, like Haymeyer did. And they have another tweet. Speaking of Haymeyer, from Todd Gopian, he's one of I think the LP treasurer. And I said, and it says 2004 in Granby, Colorado, the government destroyed Marv Heemeyer's business through a zoning dispute. They took everything he had built and destroyed his life. He destroyed their town. Sometimes reasonable men must do unreasonable things. For quote from Marv Heemeyer, hashtag Killdozer. And I agree with that. Sometimes, you have to, you might have to do some unreasonable things because if the NAP is violated or people are, you gotta stand up for yourself. I think and that's important. You always have to self-advocate, stand up for yourself, and maybe you might have to, if the NAP is violated, maybe you do have to turn to violence sometimes. So that's important to remember. And yeah, just stand up for yourself, and yeah, and just I would say don't take no shit from nobody. And I think we're gonna wrap it up there, and I'll see you guys in the next episode. Bye.